Greetings and welcome to Audio Description Around the Globe. I'm Dr. Joel Snyder, President of Audio Description Associates, LLC, and the founder and senior consultant of the Audio Description Project of ACB, or the American Council of the Blind, in the USA. I will be joined by audio description leaders from Brazil, Canada, Germany, Hong Kong, Russia, South Africa, Spain, and the United Kingdom. But first, I want to thank Jose Vieira and the WBU's immediate past president, Dr. Frederick Schroeder, for the opportunity to join a WBU General Assembly and share perspectives on audio description gathered from around the world. By way of further introduction, again, my name is Dr. Joel Snyder, and since 1981, I have had the great honor to speak on audio description or produce audio description in over 40 states here and in 63 countries. In 2014, the American Council of the Blind published my book in English, The Visual Made Verbal, a comprehensive training manual and guide to the history and applications of audio description. It's available in Braille and as an audiobook from the US Library of Congress in Polish, in Russian, in Portuguese. And by the way, the ACB is collaborating with the World Blind Union on its publication next month in Spanish. And versions in Italian and Chinese are planned for next year. Audio description is a translation of images to words. The visual is made verbal, and oral, A-U-R-A-L, he points to his ear, and oral, O-R-A-L, he points to his mouth. And it has been shown to provide access to the wide range of media and arts, that's television, film, performing arts, museums, that comprise any culture, as well as the myriad live presentations at conferences, in educational institutions, in schools with young ones, in a wide range of formats. It conveys the visual image that is not fully accessible to a significant segment of the population. And you know, in the United States alone, over 32 million people are either blind or, quote, have trouble seeing even with correction. That's from the American Foundation for the Blind, 2019. That's 8% of the population here in the US. And I am quite certain that that applies to a proportionate number or more individuals in every country around the world. And audio description has been shown to benefit people who have learning disabilities, people with autism, language learners, really all people who wish to develop more sophisticated language skills. And, you know, to the extent that audio description facilitates access to culture, I think people become more engaged with society. And it can be argued they become more engaging individuals. Even, it has been observed, more employable. Now, in November 2018, the ACB's Audio Description Project and I collaborated with the World Blind Union to produce the first ever survey of worldwide audio description activity. And that final report, by the way, is accessible via the Audio Description Project's website at www.acb.org/ADP. Simply type survey, S-U-R-V-E-Y, in the search field. We had responses from 70 countries, and I'm going to just allow me to share some key findings. 67% of respondents said that AD, audio description, is available in the respondent's country. Cinema, television, live performing arts, and DVDs lead the list of the type of AD experiences available, followed by museums, then on the web, on smartphones, in educational settings, and in visitor centers. 55% reported that AD is not required by law, but of course, almost 45% said that it is required by law. And of those folks, 64% of those respondents reported that it was required for broadcast television. 29% reported other, meaning, and let's see, 13% for museums, 12% in films, and 6% in performing arts. And no surprise, 99% of respondents said that they believe audio description or more audio description should be available. And as to the prevalence of audio description here in the US, well, I was very fortunate to be a part of the world's first audio description service. That was here in 1981 in the Washington, D.C. area, developed by a blind woman, the late Dr. Margaret Fanstiel, and the Washington Ear, a radio reading service, in collaboration with Arena Stage, a major theater producing company. Well, from there, in collaboration with the Ear, WGBH developed the very first audio described programs for broadcast television. An important innovation was the use of a secondary audio track for audio description, part of an auxiliary audio channel for analog television. And it caught on. Critically, in 2010, President Obama signed the 21st Century Communications and Video Accessibility Act, which mandated by law for the first time in the US audio description for television broadcasts. And today, almost every feature film presented in cinema includes an audio description track. And beyond that, audio description for many of those film screenings are available via download to an app called Spectrum Access. It allows consumers to use their own smartphones to access the AD. And thanks in large part to the advocacy of the American Council of the Blind, there really has been an explosion of AD availability on streaming services like Netflix and many others, often with AD available in multiple languages. In the performing arts, we estimate that AD programs exist for theaters in about 30 states. In museums, about 25 states now provide access to exhibits with audio description. Finally, in 2009, I worked with the American Council of the Blind to establish its audio description project. It offers multiple advocacy efforts connected to audio description, including the annual Audio Description Achievement Awards, the biennial Audio Description Project Conference, prizes for blind kids who write reviews of audio described media, training institutes, 2 a year, where we train audio describers, and the ADP website, which is really the go-to website for information about all aspects of audio description. Please visit www.acb.org/ADP. So with that, my friends, let's take a trip around the world and hear via video from audio description consumers, advocates, producers, and scholars. Following the video presentations during the final portion of this session, we'll hear from Angel Luis Gomez from ONCE in Madrid, the host partner for this General Assembly, and Juan Manuel Molina, head of accessibility at Il Union, a major social services advocate based in Barcelona. And then we hope to have most of our presenters with us live for about 15 or 20 minutes to entertain your questions or comments. But first, we're going to hear from, in alphabetical order by name of country, Brazil with Dr. Francisco Lima, an AD consumer and teacher of audio description at a university in Recife. Canada with Dr. Deborah Fels, a leading researcher in the use of integrated audio description. Germany with my good friend Dr. Bernd Benecke, the head of audio description production for Bayerischer Rundfunk in Munich. Hong Kong with Saimi Young from the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority. She holds an LLM in human rights at the Faculty of Law at the University of Hong Kong. Russia with Alexei Kozuliev, sorry, Alexei, the founder and CEO of RuFilms LLC at the Center of Audiovisual Translation Education. South Africa with my dear friend Shakila Maharaj, an audio description consumer and fierce advocate, the founder of Shazazin Accessible Media. Spain with a mentor of mine, Dr. Pilar Orrero from the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona, a foremost promoter of the study of audio description as a kind of audiovisual translation. And last but not least, the United Kingdom with Sonali Rai, who has done so much to support audio description in her work at the Royal National Institute of Blind People. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and begin our video.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure and an honor to be talking to you at this outstanding conference. I'm Francisco Lima, and I was born blind 56 years ago. I have always liked to watch television, movies, theaters, and everything else. However, audio description only came to my life about 15 years ago. Before that, teachers, friends, parents would describe things to me. However, audio description is much more than description. Everyone can describe, but to be an audio describer, it is necessary training, it's necessary researching, observing, or observation, and much more. In the early 2000s in Brazil, some people got in touch with audio description in Europe and in the United States. Those pioneers of audio description came back to Brazil and started providing audio description, making audio description the way they thought would be the best way. They learned by practicing. However, in 2005, some university professors started working with audio description, studying, researching, and training audio describers. I have the the pride to say that I was one of those professors who early in the 2000 started studying and then training audio describers. The auto description in Brazil started as or in the private sector, but soon afterwards, these people from the private sector would come and study in the universities. And again, some students from the university, now trained in auto description, started going into the private sector. So there was always a two-way avenue between the auto description from the university and from the private sector. In 2010, auto description started being obliged in the public television, which is the open television in Brazil, and also started being required in conferences, in school, and museums, and so on. Today, many of these places will have audio description, although not with as many hours as we would like to. We're still working on audio description enforcement, but nowadays, university students who are blind or have low vision can require audio describers so they can have classes more accessible. People who go to the movies can require audio description, though still we still don't have many movies with audio description. YouTube channels and other social media have also been providing audio description, but that's not only because they are enforced, because they're not enforced in those sectors, but people are getting more and more involved with providing visual accommodation for people who need that. Social media like Clubhouse, for instance, in Brazil, has been providing audio description. So when you go to a room and Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, it is very likely that you hear people describing themselves. Although before that there was nobody who was blind or have low vision in that place, but they are practicing that. And of course, from doing that in that environment, they're also bringing to their own everyday environment. Auto description today in Brazil is not only a matter of leisure or having the opportunity of being accommodated in movies, theaters, and so on, is also a job opportunity for people who are blind or have low vision. From about 10 years now, we have been teaching audio description for people who are blind or have low vision. And these people have been involved with audio description consulting. Audio describers now have been working with audio description consultant, people who are blind or have low vision who have learned and applied auto description techniques, helping the sighted auto describers to better provide their services for people who are blind or have low vision. Last, I'd like to mention that auto description has also been involved in a scientific field. And I can give as an example a work that I myself did in the Smithsonian Institute in DC, where I studied the auto description of arthropods. So I have worked with scientists to learn how we can provide auto description, scientific auto description of those organisms. In short, auto description in Brazil now is not only a question of legal enforcement, but it's also a question of true inclusion for people who are blind or have low vision. Thank you all and have healthy days.
Hello, everybody. My name is Deborah Fells, and I am going to provide a brief presentation about audio description in Canada. The three topics that I'm going to cover are the Canadian regulations and legislation, a little bit about the research that's going on, and an introduction to the course series in inclusive media, which trains people in audio description. The Canadian regulatory framework for broadcasters is the responsibility of the Canadian Radio, Television and Telecommunications Commission, the CRTC, and they are responsible for providing new licenses and license renewals for broadcasters. As of 2019, all broadcast content that's broadcast between 7 and 11 p.m., 7 days a week, must have audio description. This also means any of that content that's rebroadcast or streamed must also contain the audio description that it had originally. And finally, the CRTC maintains a log of the number of programming hours and type of show that has audio description. As a result of this demand, this is quite a lot of content that must be described, the broadcasters are tending to use the synthetic voice much more than they did in the past. Audio description is typically provided by third-party services or independent describers, but there is a little bit going on in-house, and that's mainly oriented around the live. In other media, like theater or film, there are fewer regulations, but there is legislation, provincial and federal legislation, which governs accessibility, and the one example of the provincial one is the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, and the brand new Accessible Canada Act enacted in June 2019 also is about providing accessible services and products in Canada. The problem with these acts or these pieces of legislation is they tend to be fairly vague, and there isn't a lot of detail about quantity, quality, metrics, and approach. And these pieces of legislation tend to defer to the CRTC or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines when it comes to media content. What's in practice is going on is the public sector is making quite an effort to become more accessible and meet the legislation, provincial and federal. The private sector is a fair bit slower, which probably isn't that surprising. But what's happening as a result of these pieces of legislation is there's an increase in the profile and awareness about accessibility and issues for people with disabilities. But the attention to audio description is a fair bit more limited, and it tends to be a lower priority. From a research perspective, there is some research going on in Canada. There are two main institutions which are conducting research. That is the Centre de Recherche à Montréal in Montreal, and they are focusing on the use of machine learning and artificial intelligence to analyze scenes and process scenes in an automated manner. The second group is at the Inclusive Media and Design Center, of which I'm the director, and that's at Ryerson University. And our focus is on audio description style and methods for audio description, as well as providing the training and education modules to Canada. As a overview of our research approach, we have 5 main key concepts. There's a theoretical component, which is, there are 2 theories which underpin most of the work that we do. And that's the social model of disability and inclusive design. Audio description then, the main key concept is that it is a creative process, and that involves decision-making on behalf of the person who is creating the audio description, and therefore it needs to be under some direction by the people who are responsible for the creative process. Then the next concept is that audio description users want to be entertained and engaged rather than just informed. We tend to work with television and film and theater mostly, so these concepts are really related to those specific media. So the person who is responsible for the creative control or the creative direction of a show is the director. And so the concept that we are always working with is that the creative team, including the director, are the ones who are responsible for the creative direction of the audio description. And the last one that we work with is that amateurs, meaning that people who are unpaid or volunteer, are an important part of the audio description landscape and should be included in the research and the evidence collecting that we do. Our key findings then are that the integrated audio description is preferred by the creative team and by the blind and low vision audiences. And what that means is that the creative team and blind and low vision individuals are involved in the audio description process from its very beginning. Audio description is not something that should happen after the content is created. And the second part of integrated audio description is that there are multiple possible styles that could be used, and that those decisions are made with the creative team. And I have a number of 4 examples of different kinds of styles that could be used: first person, third person, and newsreader, comedic, and dramatic. But there are lots of other ones. And finally, we're quite involved in knowledge transfer activities, which include conference and journal publications, more of the academic stuff. We have introduced a course series to learn about audio description and how to do it. The evidence that we have generated from our research underpins some of the standards work that's going on internationally, as well as best practices and alternative documentation. And finally, we have created Live Describe, which is an open source audio description software. So the last thing that I wanted to introduce is our course series in inclusive media. It's a broader than audio descriptions, or closed captioning as well, and regulations. There are 5 courses. The first course is the introductory course, which everybody has to take, and that's about legislation and models and more of the general topics around inclusive media. There are 2 courses in audio description, 2 courses in captioning, and the 2 courses in audio description involve things that you would expect in an audio description course, like script writing and voicing and cadence and how to deal with sensitive topics. But we also have a topic on style and how to choose styles and what are the different styles that are possible and how they would fit in different kinds of content. And then students learn the software tools that are involved in audio description, as well as they've got to do a lot of practicing, of course. And finally, we're adding a practicum course, 6th course to this series next year, which would involve students being placed in industry to get an industry perspective. So that is my very brief overview of the Canadian landscape in audio description. My contact information is, I prefer to be contacted by email. My email is details@ryerson.ca. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to entertain them now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Bernd Benecke from BR, Bayerischer Rundfunk, which means Bavarian Broadcasting, based in Munich. And we are the South German partner in the nationwide ARD network. And together with our partners, we are one of the main producers of description in Germany, which is mainly TV, video on demand, but also cinema and DVD and Blu-ray. I started with description in 1989 when audio description was introduced to Germany. I worked as an author, I worked as a narrator of audio description, and today at PR I mainly keep the ball rolling, which means I do all the planning. Sometimes I revise AD scripts, I direct the sound recording and mixing process in our sound booth, and I do training of new describers. A few words about myself. I'm 58 years old now. I have short hair, more white than gray now. I have an oval face, I have blue eyes, no glasses, no beard, and I'm wearing a white shirt today. The biggest amount on description in Germany is offered on TV. We broadcasters under public law, this is the ARD network, and our partner of ZDF, we offer description for almost every fiction program, for documentaries, for shows and sports. We don't do description normally for news, for magazines and for talk shows. And to give you some numbers, on our premium channel Das Erste, which is the first, we find in the prime time more than 50% of programs with description. If you look on a 24-hour basis, it's something like 25%. And on the other channels of our network, we normally have 15% on 24-hour basis and around 25 for the prime time. Besides us broadcasters under public law, we have private channels, but they offer almost no description. There were some shows and there were 1 or 2 series that had description, but that's very, very, very small, this amount of films. There's pressure from the EU, but they don't really react on this. Where we have description, of course, is on the international streaming services. We have all with description on Apple. We have a lot of description on Netflix. And we have some description now on Amazon Prime and on Disney+. Talking about streaming, we have also the video on demand services of us broadcasters. We have a lot of our stuff that is aired on linear TV in our Mediatheken. This is the name for our on-demand services. In the background you see the starting page of videos with description on the ARD Mediathek. Going away from TV, we have cinema, and we find the situation in Germany that every film that needs public funding, and that is almost every film in Germany, has to have description and subtitles when it goes to cinemas. This includes international films that are shot in Germany. So every German release, and on a voluntary basis, films from Disney and from Universal have description, but sometimes they don't find the way into cinemas because this is normally done through an app, and producers have to pay for the app, and this is not part of the regulations. So there is some description produced for cinema that will not find the way into the cinema, which of course is a mistake in the regulation. The quality, I have to admit, is often very, very, very low of cinema description. And it happens that when we air a film on our TV channels, have to produce a new description of this film because we find that the quality of the original is too weak. And of course, DVD, Blu-ray, yeah. Most of the films that have description for cinema will have a description track on the DVD or on the Blu-ray. And when we sell some of our programs on DVD, we normally try to put the description track on the DVD. Going to live sports, Germany is a soccer or football country, and we have a situation that in every stadium, for every team in the first and second division of a national football league, there is a description. And even in the times of pandemic, this description is offered by a stream. And I have to end with two weak points where description is still very, very low. The first thing is theater and opera. There are only a few performances with description. It's growing, but it's still very, very low. In Berlin, we have a project for 2 years that finances every performances of the public theaters in Berlin with description. And we had in May the theater meeting in Berlin, which presents the best performances from all over Germany. And these were streamed, and these were also streamed with description. And the weakest field is museums. There are only a few museums in Germany that have description, and I think there is the main field of things that have to be done with description in our country. And that's it. I'm happy to hear questions, and I think thank you.
Hi, this is Saimi, an Asian woman with slightly wavy dark brown hair to my shoulder. I'm dressed in black, sitting in my office with a wall in gray behind me. I serve as the manager of the Accessibility Office at the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority, responsible for matters on inclusion and accessibilities of the Cultural District in Hong Kong. It's my honor to join this session today to share an overview of audio descriptions in Hong Kong. Compared to many Western countries or cities, AB has a relatively short history here for around 16 years. If I mark 2005 as the start of our journey, as there were unsuccessful attempts to introduce AB here in the 1990s. It was until 2005 when Dr. Jessica Young from Hong Kong Baptist University got research funding and developed a 30-hour AD course materials in Chinese, which became the basics of some local training. Portions of the materials were used in a translation course in 2006, and I'm very fortunate to be one of the students in that class, which planted a seed for my career in accessibility. Later on, those materials were also used in the pilot training organized by us with the Disabled Association Hong Kong in 2008, and trained the first batch of describers supporting AD in performances and exhibitions for the association since 2009. Around that time, the Hong Kong Society for the Blind also started descriptions for films on a regular basis. These are some of the earliest initiatives in Hong Kong. So although I mark 2005 as the start of our history, actual AD services began in 2009 after some trainings. Significant progress has been made in the last decade with support from charities and collaborative efforts of different parties, including learnings from overseas professional describers like Dr. Joe Snyder, who trained the first batch of describers for films in Hong Kong. And some of those trained also became devoted describers and trainers to provide AD and trainings in different settings in both Hong Kong and Macau. Today, AD has been expanded to a wide range of events like movies, performances, exhibitions, sports events, etc. In a recent research on audio descriptions conducted by one of the fellows, supported by the West Kowloon Cultural District Authority, we do see a significant increase in the numbers and types of audio described programs since 2011, after the first Arts Accessibility Service Center was established in Hong Kong. Drama is one of the most common genres that will offer audio descriptions in the performing arts field. Apart from that, AD for films are also relatively common. When AD for films started in 2009, they were offered through live descriptions at a designated venue, date, and time. But with the law being worked by the Hong Kong Society for the Blind with the film industry, the first cinemas with AD facilities was launched in Hong Kong 3 years ago in 2018. Now there are around 7% of cinemas with facilities to offer AD anytime for films with pre-recorded track. This is definitely one of the milestones of AD development here. There are also new projects or organizations to join the work in recent years, including crossover work with other professions. For example, the Hong Kong Blind Unions collaborates with the Hong Kong Football Associations to offer descriptions for football events, and the Audio Descriptions Association Hong Kong to collaborate with the Cantonese Opera Advancement Associations to train audio describer for Cantonese opera, a specific art form that is quite unique and lack of describers at the moment. And there's also a social enterprise, the Beyond Vision Projects, to work with Worldwide Fund for Nature Hong Kong to design tactile materials and trained tour guides to lead eco tours with audio descriptions and tactile experiences together. Apart from projects driven by organizations, there are also bottom-up initiatives by individuals who identified gaps in the field. For example, in 2019, a few describers established a channel on social media, lined up a pool of describers to work on AD for news images, with an aim to provide access for people with visual impairments to news images in a more objective manner. Recently, there are programmers who, with visual impairment, initiated collaborations with describers to develop a platform for providing AD for online videos. The platform is under testing and trials by some people with visual impairments and describers at the moment. All these developments are very impressive work happening here to raise awareness of all and improve access for people with visual impairment. However, there are challenges for sustainability of AD deals without funding support. Although public arts and cultural organizations will engage accessibility service with professional fees, the majority AD initiatives for many others are still driven by non-profit organizations without regular fundings. Apart from that, unlike some countries or cities that have regulations on media accessibility, a comparable regulatory framework is not available here. The provisions for AD for theory programs and other areas of work are always on a voluntary basis, or so-called best practice, which are not guaranteed to be offered. This is definitely one of the hurdles for mainstreaming AD in Hong Kong. But we do hope that with the increasing trends and awareness of the importance of media accessibility around the globe, and with university in Hong Kong started to providing AD as elective, AD as professions could be further developed and recognized gradually. That's all for my sharing today, and I look forward to more exchange and sharings from others. Thank you.
I'm Alexei Kozulaev, the head of RU Films Group and the head of the School of Audiovisual Translation. And I would like to tell a few words about the history of audio description in our country and its modern state. The first film with the Russian audio description was demonstrated in Moscow in 1973. And it was equipped with special devices for transmitting enhanced film sound to help the hearing impaired audience listen to movie soundtracks. Therefore, it was simple to provide the blind people with an access to the described movie. It was enough to give them pocket hearing aid and connect a mic to the inductive loop amplifier. And the describer was located in a booth and described the movie. And also in the 1970s, the release of the so-called sound films began. The sound film was actually a phonogram recorded on various media, like magnetic tapes, etc., in which the film soundtrack and the audio description were mixed. Although there were no guidelines for that, and all in all, the centralized library system of Russia and the libraries for the blind people established by the All Union Society for the Blind provided quite a few movies for the blind audiences. But at a certain point, the Russian, well, in 1990s, the Russian audio description actually began to exist under a different name. It was called Tiflo commenting, and what was worse, the developers of the so-called Tiflo commenting concept actually distracted from the global tendencies in this respect. Well, actually, it was a mistake because Joel Snyder in 2002 organized seminars for audio describers and told the participants about the theory and practice of audio description. Well, he listed requirements for describers, showed typical mistakes, revealed secrets of the profession. Still, the notion of triple commenting was developed, and it was defined as a concise description of an object, location, or action that a blind or visually impaired person cannot understand without special verbal explanation. And it pays much attention to qualities and skills of a specialist who provides audio description. Well, the commentator's voice should be clear and the words should be pronounced correctly. Special attention should be paid to the pronunciation of word endings, etc., etc. But at a certain point, Sergei Vanshin, who developed this concept, initiated a campaign in 2008 to remove the international term audio description from Russian scientific literature and mass media. He claimed that the term audio description did not reflect the wide spectrum of activities provided for the blind audience, since the word audio implies the oral form of description alone, whereas such descriptions may also be made in a written form. Well, as a result, a certain terminological iron curtain was created, and it prevented Russian specialists from studying the international experience in this field. Well, some commentators didn't even know the term audio description. Well, in numerous interviews, many Tiflo commentators admit that they cannot describe dance, ballet, or special visual effects. And the international colleagues have published many articles and guidelines on these topics. Well, it actually only recently, in 2015, a group of researchers and audiovisual translators began restudying the international experience in this field and promoting the widely accepted scientific approach to audio description. The RUFilms School of Audiovisual Translation invited numerous prominent researchers, audio describers, and audiovisual translators to train Russian colleagues in audio description. In cooperation with several leading universities, the School for AVT started training audio describers throughout the country. In 2017, the national standard on Tiflo commenting was adopted. And it was an important step in the promotion of accessibility principles. The standard contains terms and their definitions and is intended to regulate different activities related to audio description. And it was a success for us, for audio describers, because the concept on which the standard is based greatly differs from Vanshin's Tiflo commenting concept. And it looks more like audio description, and it allows uh, further development of Tiflo commenting version 2.0. And the standard, for example, contains a classification of Tiflo commenting types and forms that has no direct correspondence in the genuine Tiflo commenting concept. It defines the new standard includes verbal commentary, written commentary, description of actions, description of static images into that. And it was quite a success. And at this point, we can say that it allowed a few Russian companies to develop mobile applications and endorse a new era in the study of the Russian audio description.
Greetings from Durban, South Africa. I am Shakila Maharaj, an organizational psychologist and social entrepreneur, a researcher and disability strategist, founder of Daisy SA and Driving Audio Description in South Africa. I am of Indian descent. I have short dark hair, brown eyes, and petite in build. After attending Dr. Joel Snyder's workshop in 2009, I established an audio description company. Being a first in South Africa and pioneering a new service, I adopted a multi-pronged strategic approach to gain entry and position this new art form and access tool. With Joel, we ran awareness sessions across the country with key stakeholders from disability, the audiovisual industry, and government. We conducted skills training across the country and certified over 70 persons. We showcased audio described films in cinemas in different cities and established the AD Movie Club, all of which to achieve audio description, appreciation, and audience development. We lobbied and advocated with government and with the KZN Provincial Film Commission and entrenched in their policy and strategy and disability code, audio description. Our first breakthrough came when we conducted a project for the national broadcaster SABC, a 13-episode telenova in a local language, isiZulu, with audio description in isiZulu. Despite all of this, the challenge remains. The audio description industry has been slow to grow in South Africa. While the industry embraces the concept, they have been reluctant to pay for the service and perpetuate the stereotype that needs for persons with disabilities should be charity-driven. Also, cinemas and broadcasters lack the digital capability to deliver audio description and do not want to incur the cost of expensive infrastructure to do so. Blindness sector organizations have not been clear in their recognition and understanding of audio description as a basic rights issue, providing access to information. They have lacked insight into its profound implication for individual development and social integration. Many visually impaired persons in South Africa are unaware of audio description and have not been exposed to it. Ironically, the COVID era has opened more doors for audio description in the past year than we had in the last decade. With the exponential growth in video content and digital information and communication, access to innovation funding became available. Tapping into this, we created Shazison Accessible Media, SAM, a new company with the objective to bring young blood and to shift audio description into the digital space. Our team of graduates from IT, film, and sound background, provide a total solution, creating audio description content and delivering audio description content on our Shazison mobile application. Already in the 1 year, we have carried out several Netflix projects and are currently working on 11 local films, some of which are in isiZulu. The future for audio description is promising because of the growth drivers. The visually impaired segment is growing, sadly, but for audio description, the demand becomes greater. There are over 400,000 in South Africa, and that excludes aging persons. An estimated 50 million in Africa of visually impaired persons. The demand for visual content across all disciplines has become even greater during the pandemic period. Over 300 hours of video content is uploaded to YouTube per minute. Over 3 billion videos are watched daily globally. Nearly 49 million individuals have access to television in South Africa, and over 50 million households have a television. More persons with visual disabilities are aware of audio description, and largely brought about by the streaming channels like Netflix. Netflix subscription has grown to 400,000 in the past year in South Africa. Consumer demand, consumer awareness, and the trend for increased audio description in the developed world is surely setting the direction for growth in audio description in South Africa. In conclusion, I would like to share my thoughts on what I believe the World Blind Union could assist more with. Strongly position audio description as a basic human right, providing access to information. Recognize audio description and conduct research on it as a developmental instrument that supports individual and social effectiveness. Promote audio description in your daily practices and promote audio description with your member organizations. Intervene in standard setting with respect to values and ethics, particularly in the depiction of ethnicity and in the use of derogatory language. Recognize and manage and control the sinister use of censorship by subscription channels with respect to limiting our exposure to what is visible. All that is visible to the sighted should be visible to us. This practice does more harm than good. Promote a conducive environment that allows audio description practitioners to acquire permissions from right owners of video content and to enable cross-border sharing of audio description tracks. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate.
Hello, my name is Pedro. I work at Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona in Spain. I am 62. I have a grey short hair. I'm wearing a stripy t-shirt, a blue and mustard color stripy t-shirt, and I am in my study, and behind me there is bookshelves with books, and I also have a blue sofa and two pictures on the wall. One of them is a bridge, an orange bridge, and the other one is a man writing a book. I would like to say what's going on in Spain about audio description. And since I work at university, I would like to emphasize what's going on research in Spain regarding audio description. Audio description started very much descriptive field where we were trying to learn, and for us, was the best in Spain. Really an eye-opener, and we learned all from him. So first of all, we had to understand what was audio description and to learn how to do audio description. And then we moved from being a descriptive field to being an experimental field. And recently we've been working in some projects like iMac, where we're trying to understand audio description in immersive environment. That is when you are in a 360 volumetric video, and you can turn around, look up, look down, and there is a video around you. So how would audio description work in such environment? And at the moment we are just looking at that, how to produce the video like that with audio description, and how would the sound behave in audio description in such a way. And we have 3 projects for that. We're working in a project called So Closed, in another project Mediaverse, and in another project called Traction. And we're trying to understand where should or how should the video be displayed or heard, where the takes place in the 360, where as if someone is telling me what is happening, so reporting what is happening, or in the that's in an ambi-sound way, so the sound and surround quality, but it would also have directionality and it would have intensity, so you would be able to locate where the sound comes from, and that would give you extra clues to what's happening and where it's happening. That's on the side of the research. We'd also developed a media player, because one thing is very good is to create the content accessible. The other thing is that to interact with that content, the media player also has to be accessible. So we have developed an accessible media player for immersive environments as well, which is free, completely free. It is the code is available on GitHub, so you can go to GitHub, look up for iMac, IMAC, and it is there for you to develop further. And so this is what we're doing for research right now. And also we're trying to understand something called extended audio description, and that is when we need more time to explain what is happening. The reproduction stops, then the audio description continues, and then when the audio description is finished, then the reproduction of whatever media goes on. But these days, and we haven't got any results from yet, so we hope to do that very soon. Regarding the practice of audio description is taught in many universities in Spain and in Spanish and also in Switzerland. And audio description is now present in all televisions, in all national televisions, public televisions, broadcasts, also the private broadcasters. There are stable programs with audio description. And also in opera, for example, in Barcelona, operas are always, and they have been for the last, I don't know, something like 17 years with audio description. And theatres, theatre houses now, they have description, quite a lot of them as well. So audio description is now a stable accessibility service, and it's increasingly so. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this year's event. I think it's fantastic. Thank you very much, and thank you for asking me.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are. I'm Sonali Rai from the Royal National Institute of Blind People. That's the RNIB. Joel, let me just start by thanking you for organizing this session on audio description and for inviting us along. It's such a pleasure to be here. And even more than that, hearing about all the developments from across the world, it gives you that sense of optimism almost for the focus on accessibility, and particularly the focus on media and culture services and how it fits into that mainstream service that is consumed by sighted and people with sight loss in just the same way. I think we're all aiming for parity here, and that's what audio description gives us. I was looking through my old notes to prepare for this session, and I came across the Auditor report from the early 90s. For those of you who don't know, in 1991, the Independent Television Commission launched the Auditor Consortium. So the consortium was funded by the European Commission. The aim was to explore artistic production and technical issues to deliver an audio description service on television. So that was really the start of the service that we see on our television channels today. 100 people were given specialist devices to test the service, to flag any issues and give us feedback on what the potential barriers could be or the benefits could be for the wider rollout. Now, this was back in 1994. 27 years on, in the UK, there are about 80 channels that delivered audio descriptions. I'm talking about last year. On average, just over 26% of the content on these channels was audio described. So this came to about 250,000 hours across the year. Television aside, there has been significant support for audio description on most entertainment and cultural sectors. So whether it's the cinema industry delivering audio description on theatrical releases or the home entertainment, so I'm talking about the DVDs and the Blu-rays here, or it's the theaters, the museums, the art galleries, and the stadiums delivering audio description. We want all these services to be just as accessible as they are for their sighted peers. And the service that's obviously fast replacing television as the largest resource for audio description. So I'm talking about the video on demand service, I'm talking about the streamers, Netflix, Amazon Video, Disney Plus, Apple TV, BBC iPlayer, BritBox. That's a very, very long list. And I don't need to say much about these services, really, do I? I mean, all of us have experienced it. They've completely transformed how we watch content. There are people on the tube, on the bus, in the cafes, queues at the airport. They're all watching Game of Thrones episodes. Not my favorite show, but people love it, so there you go. Delivering an accessible experience on these services is it's relatively straightforward, provided you've thought of accessibility while designing your apps. So as long as they work with screen readers, they work with magnification tools, and they've got audio description, so they're very much good to go. I think we've been quite lucky in the UK. A number of factors came together to make AD, I'd say, quite the success it is today. So there was support from the industry, end users embraced it, they gave us a lot of feedback, which we continue to share with the industry, and then the government, so in form of legislation. And at RNIB, we obviously don't produce any content. We almost see ourselves as conduits between the industry and the end users. And it is the end users who are driving the conversation today. So we have a generation now for whom audio description is, the service is not a novelty. It's not a new service. It's always been around as far as they're concerned. And they don't want to know how much content you've got. So they're not concerned about the 10%, 20%, or even the 40% of content that you've got with audio description. What they want to know is whether the program that they want to watch, the film, the drama, the documentary, is that audio described? Is the audio description available on the app that they're going to use or the platform that they're going to use? If not, then you fail to do the job because there's a barrier in accessibility. And now they have a voice, they have a strong voice on social media. So they are reaching out to service providers directly, which is great because they are demanding change. And the change is not just about the quantity of description, but they're also addressing issues about the quality of description. So it's not just about the written or the spoken descriptions anymore. Audio description itself has developed into this generic term almost that covers a wide range of narrative treatments. These are being applied across different formats, different genres, on different platforms. So aside from the spoken narrative, which is the traditional description, sound design has become an important part of the experience. Apple TV recently extended the Dolby Atmos experience to audio description users. Now, we never thought this would happen, so that's an impressive development. There are other challenges, lots of challenges for service providers. 10, 15 years ago, we had a device to watch television. So there was a television in the living room. That's what you watched TV on. Or you had a TV in the TV room or in the library or in the bedroom or just somewhere in the house. That's where you watch TV. But what do you do now? There are over 100 devices that deliver content I can watch Netflix on my iPad, my iPhone, my Xbox, lots of different devices. And you can't say any one device is more important than the other because you're talking about a very, very large user base that has different interests and different preferences. So what's needed is a robust, consistent viewer experience across all these different devices. So almost, every time you think you're close now to resolving the issue about media accessibility, you have a pipeline that works, a reliable service. Suddenly someone thinks of a new format or a new delivery system, and you're almost right back where you started. What's needed for accessibility is to be considered at the start, at the design stage, and not after the service has been released. So not after people start getting in touch with you about the inaccessible app or to find where is the audio description, how do I switch it on? Who would have thought I would be able to watch, a National Theatre production or a Royal Shakespeare Company production on my laptop with audio description? But I did. During the lockdown, I could switch it on while I was watching a theatre production. Similarly, during the exhibition at the National Gallery, now, whilst there might be services that are accessible, there are about 100 different services that are not. So, as ever, never a dull moment in the life of someone working on accessibility, and particularly accessibility of media and culture services. So that's where I'll leave you, and that's where I'll stop. Obviously, very happy to take any questions that there are. And Joel, thanks again very much for inviting us.
Buenas tardes, mis mejores deseos para todos. Me presento, soy Juan Manuel Molina, director del área de accesibilidad a la información y a la comunicación de la Unión Salud. Dentro de este área tenemos 4 líneas de actividad: la de transcripción braille, la de validación de los documentos de equivalencia de los medicamentos en braille para la industria farmacéutica, la de grabación de audiolibros y la línea de accesibilidad a los contenidos audiovisuales. En esta última línea, durante el año 2020, hemos realizado 12.000 horas de subtitulado en diferido, 7.000 horas de subtitulado en directo y 1.500 horas de audiodescripción. Dentro de la audiodescripción, que es el asunto que nos atañe, me gustaría destacar 2 puntos determinantes a la hora de hacer los guiones de audiodescripción. Uno que aparece en la norma UNE 153.020 que aplicamos en España, y es la regla espacio-temporal, que hace referencia a la contextualización de la escena de cuándo, dónde, quién, qué y cómo. Y otro no menos importante, aunque no aparece en la norma UNE mencionada y que aplicamos con celo en Ilunion, y es el ritmo cinematográfico, para que el usuario de la audiodescripción pueda seguir el ritmo que marca el director de la obra audiovisual.
Muy buenos días a todas y a todos, y por mi parte voy a darles unas pinceladas muy rápidas sobre el funcionamiento del servicio de audiodescripción que prestamos desde la ONCE. Bueno, pues empezar diciéndoles que en 1988 la ONCE, tras la realización de algunos estudios previos, crea con carácter experimental el servicio denominado Sonocine, cuyo hito más conocido fue la proyección de la película de Bertolucci, Último Tango en París. Si bien en aquel entonces hay que decir que la prensa española no supo entender el sentido ni el alcance futuro que tendrían las producciones audiovisuales audiodescritas para las personas con discapacidad visual, para quienes supuso un acercamiento y disfrute de estas manifestaciones culturales. Sin embargo, estas experiencias iniciales hasta 1993 no volvieron a retomarse por parte de la ONCE, desde donde se puso en marcha el programa denominado AUDES, que posibilitó la creación de guiones cinematográficos y documentales y llevó la audiodescripción a las salas teatrales también. Un logro fundamental, sin duda, en España fue la publicación por parte de la Agencia Española de Normalización, AENOR, de la norma 153020, denominada Audiodescripción para personas con discapacidad visual, requisitos para la audiodescripción y elaboración de audioguías. Se trata de una herramienta hoy en día imprescindible para todas aquellas empresas, entidades y profesionales que elaboren productos audiodescritos para el disfrute de personas con discapacidad visual. Hay que tener en cuenta que a lo largo de estos más de 25 años ha cambiado mucho la forma de acceso a los contenidos audiodescritos al haber experimentado una considerable evolución. En la actualidad, las personas afiliadas a la ONCE pueden acceder a la biblioteca AUDES de dos maneras fundamentalmente. Por una parte, a través de la biblioteca online AUDES, que está ubicada en un espacio restringido y gratuito para el colectivo de personas afiliadas a la ONCE denominado Club 11. Entre sus principales contenidos se destaca el acceso al catálogo de títulos disponibles, consultar las novedades y además permite acceder a un buscador que facilita el acceso a una ficha correspondiente a cada producción con información sobre el director, actores, género, sinopsis, etc. Y además permite descargar los ficheros MP3 de obras audioescritas para su audición, su audición en distintos dispositivos como PCs, smartphones, tabletas y reproductores MP3 o DAISY. Al igual que ver, por supuesto, en streaming dichas producciones. Como datos globales, comentarles que las producciones audiovisuales disponibles con audiodescripción en Club 11 ascienden ya a más de 800 películas y en torno a 50 producciones entre series, documentales y cortometrajes. Y la otra opción que les comentaba es el acceso a los contenidos audiovisuales audioscritos a través de la aplicación denominada Audes Mobile. Se trata de una app gratuita para teléfonos inteligentes que se presentó en 2013 y que permite disfrutar de contenidos audiodescritos con independencia del medio o plataforma en la que se reproduzcan, como puede ser la televisión o el cine. El funcionamiento de esta aplicación es realmente sencillo. El usuario, tras instalarse la aplicación, solo tiene que descargar los bocadillos Audes de la película o serie que desea visualizar y una vez se inicie esta, el móvil sincronizará el momento en que se encuentre la película con los bocadillos previamente descargados en el terminal. Como datos también en esta aplicación, contamos con en torno a 1.100 títulos disponibles entre películas, documentales y series. Y por mi parte, nada más, un placer y muchísimas gracias.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, I've learned a lot, certainly. I've learned a lot. Let me just make sure I've got the right screen. I want to share my screen that has everybody's email address, and I have posted them all in, oh my goodness, I've posted them all in the chat. So here, I will try one more time to get that up on the screen. There we go, good. And I will also now take a look at the chat to see what questions there might be. Eduardo, can you read them aloud for me so I can leave this screen up? Let's see. I am going to see if I can figure out seeing the chat. And I know I can do, there we go. Let's do it this way. I see a question from Gabriela Manuela. Is there any difference between audio description for children and AD for adults? Let me throw that open to panelists. Any panelists, what are your opinions about that? Go ahead and unmute. Differences between description for children and for adults.
Well, may I intervene here, Joel?
Sure.
Well, if we think in terms of general techniques or notions about how to audio describe, there's none, but we've got to remember that children have a different interest in movies and other visual phenomena. So we've got to pay attention to the language and to the sounds that are quite important for children, especially when we're talking about cartoons and other films related to children. So the youngest the children are, the more we've got to pay attention to concision, clarity, observation and everything else that involve the audio description technique.
I would add certainly reading level and reading rate has to be considered. I directed a program that for 6 years provided the audio description for the first time for Sesame Street, the American, very popular American children's program. And we needed to adjust the comprehension level of the language that we use. No big 3-syllable words, etc. Any other thoughts from other panelists?
Yeah, we usually treat audio description for kids and for adults as well, two different concepts, because from the quantitative point of view, the lexicon of kids aged, say, 5 or 6, well, includes from about 2,000 words, at least in Russia. An educated adult, well, in Russia at least, uses actively about 20,000 words. It's a tenfold difference. So we all face, if we have kids or grandkids at home, we usually coming from the office and they ask us, listen, what happened when you were out? And you start telling that in adult language, and suddenly understand that a kid doesn't understand half the words you are using, not concepts, but words. So audio description is the same thing. Yeah. You simply have to understand that they have a very small vocabulary. Well, it's well, that's it.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, there is always the opportunity to provide a learning opportunity when there's a word that is just right. A child can always turn to mama or the teacher, and what does that mean? And you spark education that way, I think. There's another question up here. If AD is being used for DVD, does that mean it would only be enjoyable to people who are visually impaired? That's an interesting question. I always like to say that audio description is for folks who are blind and for sighted folks who are in the kitchen making a sandwich while the TV or the DVD is playing in the other room. You can hear what you can't see. You're not blind, you're just in the wrong place, if you will. Thoughts about that one?
I think I can comment on that, Joel, if that's
Please.
all right.
Yes.
So the mainstream DVDs that you can buy from retailers like Amazon, in those DVDs, audio description is an additional track. So it's a language track. You can switch it on, you can switch it off. But then there are specialist DVDs. And quite often, I mean, RNIB used to sell these specialist DVDs. So the main soundtrack would be mixed with the audio description. And when you switch it on, what you would hear is a mix, is a master track, soundtrack and the audio description mixed. Now, whether you want to say whether the description track is just for blind people or for sighted people as well, that's something that I'm not going to comment on because we don't have any evidence. And I try and stay away from that question as much as possible. But Joel, I agree with you. I think there are instances, I'm sure there are use cases that we need to look into. Yeah. To establish.
Well, definitely. I mean, I hear from sighted people periodically about, I never realized that was there. I've seen this movie before, and then I heard the description and like, oh my, there it is, right? And so there is that, of course. And Sonali makes a great point about, if you're in your living room and the person who's blind is enjoying the film with description, and the person who's sighted, well, just doesn't want that enhancement, if you will. That's where those apps come in handy, because the person who wants the description can listen to it through their own app, with their own smartphone, with their own earbud, and the television audio in the living room can simply be on without description. So that's one other aspect.
Joel?
Yes, please.
So I'd like to add to that as well. My experience has been that when we train sighted persons in audio description, that it certainly enhances their appreciation of the visual content. And I have found that they then transfer it beyond recorded or video material to daily living and the natural environment. So colleagues that I have trained and exposed to audio description to have become far more sensitive to visual cues, have become far more aware and appreciative of visuals that they may have otherwise missed, and have said that to me repeatedly.
Oh, yeah.
I also want to pick up on an earlier question regarding children. My experience again there has been that you can certainly grow the vocabulary and language skills of children by introducing description, and that's both with sighted as well as
Absolutely.
children without sight. And in our audio description movie club, our intention was to add tactile cues. Children who have never seen, for example, comic heroes and how they look in the shape and so forth, providing complementary toys that have been like Batman and so forth. When they touch and feel, the three-dimensional experience of the description applied with the tactile experience just creates a total understanding.
Yeah.
So there is, it's just
description as an aid to literacy, and that applies to all children. Description invites comparisons. You hear synonyms, you hear alliteration. The whole level of literacy is raised for anybody listening, I think.
Absolutely.
There's an interesting question here from a viewer, a listener in Indonesia, asking, is there audio description available for movies so they can enjoy the show in the cinema? And yes, there is. Now, the specific availability, of course, in Jakarta is I'm not aware of, although I've done workshops in Jakarta, and in fact, I was introduced to a system of description that some of you may be unfamiliar with. They call it whisper cinema, and certain screenings of certain films in particular theaters, blind folks are welcome with a sighted guide, a describer, who will whisper to them throughout the screening the descriptions as much as possible in the pauses between bits and pieces of dialogue. That was a good old days, right? That's the way description happened for folks in movies many years ago. Well, it still happens in Indonesia occasionally, and it's okay because you're not bothering everybody. Everybody's whispering. So that's kind of fun. Let's see, what else do we have? Will these, the webinars stay on a YouTube channel? I will let you stay in touch with the good folks at the World Blind Union to find out for sure about that. Let me see, again, everybody's email address is posted. I'm from New Zealand. We have AD mostly on TV, live theater, museum tours. Keen to know more about sports with AD. Is this mainly at stadiums or on TV or both? And who mainly does the AD, sports commentators or whom? Also, what has been the feedback by users on the use of synthetic speech? Ooh, don't get me started on synthetic speech. I'll say no more. New Zealand has description. I've had the pleasure of doing some workshops there. I'm going to ask Sonali to comment on that because I know of the UK and the development of description for sports in the UK. Can you speak to that, Sonali?
Thank you for not asking me about synthetic speech, Joel.
Right. We'll let that alone.
I've heard enough about.
We'll let that alone.
From me.
Right.
No, on sports, for the UK, we've got audio description on sports in stadiums. So if you're talking about, let's say, football, Soccer Site was a project that RNIB had launched. This was way back. I believe this was way back in 2006. It was a 3-year project. That was really the start of audio description in football stadiums. And at the moment, there are most of the stadiums, I would say, a majority of them deliver audio description service. And it is very much appreciated by people with sight loss. On television, because it's live, we do not have the capability to deliver audio description. Not until now. There might be something quite soon, but I can't talk about it right now at the moment. But a lot of blind people have said that they don't want audio description on, let's say, let's say football matches, because what they do is they switch on the radio commentary and they sync it with the television feed, and that works quite well for them.
Yeah, I heard that as well. A good friend of mine will go to a game, he's sighted, but he'll be listening to the commentator that radio broadcasters provide, because they are, by the nature of the business, they are audio describers of sorts, really. So go ahead.
Can I add
yes,
to
Francisco,
that?
sure, please.
We've had some experiences here in Brazil as far as soccer or football. However, some people would also prefer having commentators rather than audio describers. But as far as martial arts, for instance, audio describers are very, very welcome, because if you're talking about boxing, for instance, it's not only jabbing, it's also the movements and how the players move their legs and how they balance their bodies and so on and so forth. Things that many commentators won't say. So yeah, whenever you have very good audio description, it will be still better than any other commentators.
Yeah. I will say that I had the pleasure of describing a rodeo for an American Council of the Blind convention at one point, and that was great fun. Ben, did you want to add to that?
And no synthetic voice.
No.
Yeah, I'd like to add something about AD on TV for sports, which we actually have starting in, I think, 3 minutes. We will have live description for the game between England and Germany on the Euro 2020.
There you go.
And actually, we started in putting description on TV by putting the radio track onto TV, and people were complaining because they said this is not description, this is more comment on what is happening. What we want is we want to have a description of what is happening in each second, each minute on the field, and that's what's happening in the description. And if you compare both, there's a difference. There's no comment on something. It's just telling you what is happening, who has the ball, who will do the penalty or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, the commentary is something that traditional audio describers avoid. We don't need to explain, we describe. We don't need to tell, we show, I think. There are a couple other points here. Someone is asking about guidelines or national or international standards. And I don't know that we can refer to international standards, except perhaps at the ISO that Deborah mentioned earlier. Each individual country has developed guidelines which are, to be honest with you, I've read many of them, and they're pretty much the same basic fundamentals. And my book, The Visual Made Verbal, brings together many of them. So that's one thing to keep in mind. But individual countries, I know Canada, Spain, Germany have guidelines posted, other countries as well. And I think I might go back to Bernd for this question. I can imagine will be our last. I don't know if it's already been mentioned, but do audio describers ask for a copy of the script, or the audio description is created separately? How do you do that, Bernd?
What do you mean with the script? The script of the
original.
That was what they've done before
production.
The film was shot.
Correct.
Yeah, I don't know if they're really asking for it. They get it. So
They do
if they want it, they can use it. Also, some ask for a book of the dialogues, because sometimes they're not sure if they understood all the names correctly and these. But normally, yeah, if it's available, sometimes, of course, if you have an old Hollywood movie, there is no script anymore. But for all new films or films that we do in-house, of course, they get the script and they get the dialogue lists.
Sure.
And it may help. I'm not sure if they use it every time, but they can.
Yeah, absolutely. We do have someone from the Philippines is asking about getting audio description going in general. You're welcome to send emails to any or all of our panelists. I've done work in Manila and Naga City in the Philippines, and so it's very minimal for sure. AD and image alt text helps me understand and imagine and understand visual concepts for sure, for sure. This has been, I have learned a great deal. So thank you, panelists. Thank you, OMFE and the World Blind Union. It has been an honor to be part of the World Blindness Summit. And I'm sure recordings of this will be available. It's been a pleasure to be with you. Signing off from the United States and from around the world.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Healthy days to you all.
Yes.
Thank you.